one of my strengths is that I'm an achiever. And for, one of the tools that I use, not only, personally, but also with all my clients is Clifton Strengths. And I took Clifton Strengths when I was back in business school, and I was in this course called Living the Good Life, which was about entrepreneurship. And I always joke that if it had been called Entrepreneurship 101, I would have never taken it, but it was called
Mhm.
Living the Good Life. And I was so burnt out at that point in clinical practice that I was like, sign me up. I'll take two. So I ended up, getting into that class. And one of the things that our professor recommended was Clifton Strengths. So I went.
Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. My guest today is a certified nurse midwife who has earned $300,000 in revenue from her coaching practice while also helping countless other nurses live the good life. Ann Konkoly has been a midwife, a medical director, and most recently a business coach for women advanced practice nurses who are wanting to do good for the world and do well for themselves. She also manages the 7,000 plus member Facebook group called Side Hustles for APNs, as well as the Nurses Living the Good Life Mastermind, where she helps APN business owners who want to grow their impact and their bottom line. It's a pleasure having you on the show today, Ann.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, starting off, I often like to start at the beginning. And, I tell people that my first degree was in business administration, and that has always affected the way that I see the world around me. And I couldn't help but notice that your first degree was actually in psychology. So how has that shaped your career path and how you see the world?
I think that I chose psychology because it was interesting to me and I like how the brain works. And I thought it was interesting to learn about decision making and to learn about social psychology and why why we do the things that we do. And I think that's always, guided a lot of the work that I've done, whether it's interacting with patients or, working on projects, being a medical director, building a business. And so, but I love psychology. It's funny when I went though to college, I knew I wanted to do, I thought I wanted to go to medical school but I kind of knew I wanted to do nursing, but I really, really knew what I wanted to do was to catch babies. And so that was something that was of interest to me. And I just had a fascination with birth and I just thought it was like the coolest stuff ever. So I went and got my undergrad degree and along the way figured out that being, an OBGYN and doing surgery wasn't something that I had an interest in. And I think I had at that point too, an understanding that the practice of medicine was not really in alignment with kind of my core values and the way that I like to operate. So midwifery, though, was a great fit. So psychology was a way for me to get a degree. It was something I was really interested in. And then I went and did the accelerated program in nursing, then went back and got a master's and did the dual program for midwifery and women's health, NP, and then started, into practice. And I've come full circle, I think now, I went after that, got an MBA. I was in the part of my career where I thought, what am I going to do? I really got to a place where I loved clinical practice and I enjoyed being medical director. And I knew that there was this other side that I was really interested in. I just didn't know what that was. And so I, found coaching as an avenue that helped me to really combine a lot of the pearls from midwifery, being able to use shared decision making as a model for care, being able to hold space for people, especially when it's hard and when there's like a lot going on. And then just, doing all of that without having the bullshit of doing a SOAP note, right? Like without having to do all the charting or ICD-10 codes or fighting for pre-auths with insurance companies. So coaching really was a great fit. And I think that's really, it's full circle. So in this role where I currently do business coaching, I think it's a combination of all of those things. And it's been a roundabout journey, so to speak. And I'm glad I'm where I am.
Yeah, well, and there's so much to unpack right there. You covered quite a bit there. So, and I know I touched on it a bit in the intro, and you just did a little bit, but your career experiences have been just so wide ranging, from being a practitioner to clinical faculty to a medical director, public speaker, content editor, and business coach. So you've really been willing to try a lot of different things. So what is it that kind of gives you that courage to be willing to just change things up every once in a while?
Well, it's probably a little bit of a restlessness, number one. And number two, one of my strengths is that I'm an achiever. And one of the tools that I use, not only, personally, but also with all my clients is Clifton Strengths. And I took Clifton Strengths when I was back in business school, and I was in this course called Living the Good Life, which was about entrepreneurship. And I always joke that if it had been called Entrepreneurship 101, I would have never taken it, but it was called Living the Good Life. And I was so burnt out at that point in clinical practice that I was like, sign me up, I'll take two. So I ended up, getting into that class. And one of the things that our professor recommended was Clifton Strengths. So I went and I did Clifton Strengths online, and my number one strength is being an achiever. And so I think it's a little bit of being courageous and being able to just go out and try something. It's probably also a little bit of being an achiever and an executor. And so I tend to be a yes person. If I get asked to do things, I'm usually a yes. I usually sometimes regret that later on, and sometimes it ends up being a blind spot that I got to be kind of careful about. And you mix that in with a little bit of people pleasing, and like it's a recipe for being burnt out and totally overworked. And but generally speaking, I think I've just said yes to a lot of things that have come along, and I'm not so scared to go out and try things. I think it's just kind of inherent to that, being an achiever and saying, how do I win? And if I can win, sounds interesting, I'm in.
Yeah, I'm going to find a way to figure this out. I think that's a mentality that a lot of nurses have. A lot of healthcare providers in general, but yeah, particularly nurses. But
yeah, well, and I think, COVID's a great example of that, which is like, if you didn't have that mentality, you would have said sayonara, the minute that there was any, conversation about this, coronavirus circulating in China, and like, you would have been like, I'm out, I'm good. But that's, I think, a piece that many of us share as nurses, which is like, all right, I'll figure it out. Hell, if I can figure out how to drain a Foley and not have to go in the room 100 times over the night, like just position it just right so it flows out, I'm pretty sure I can figure out just about anything.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, like in recent years, you've actually highlighted burnout, speaking of coronavirus and all that, and, cultivating that emotional intelligence and changing mindsets for healthcare leaders. So why are these such important issues for you? I mean, obviously you're seeing some of these things firsthand, right?
Yeah. And I think what I never understood about burnout was that burnout is really got two components to it. And there's an internal factor and then there's an external factor. And I think for a long time, I really chalked it up to like, I was a problem. And in part I was, because I had some shit thoughts, and, I really had to work on some of the overachieving and some of the seeking external praise and validation and that kind of stuff. So that was mine to work on, and I own that. What I didn't understand, I think, about burnout was just this idea that there's this second piece, which is these external systems, which tend to often be toxic. And so, and they're built on usually a hierarchy, and, and there's some patriarchy involved, and they are favorable to some, and then they oppress others. And so I think that when I started to think about, when I think about burnout in terms of advanced practice nurses, and then I think about entrepreneurship, I think if you get to a point where you say, I'll do my part to manage my mind. I'll know my strengths. I'll develop my emotional quotient. I will become more self-aware. I will do that work. And if I still, and I'll manage myself. And then if I still go into the system and it's raining toxicity, and I'm subject then to all of the overworking, overbearing, micromanaging, BS that comes along with it,
Mhm.
then I think it's kind of like you get to a point where I think entrepreneurship just becomes this beautiful opportunity for those of us who are, have a sense of how we think it could be done and if it could be done better. And entrepreneurship gives you that freedom, I think, to say, look, I'll manage me. I'll create the environment or the culture which doesn't have those elements. And then I'm gonna, to boot, make money so that I can go sip champagne and gin cocktails on the beach in Turks and Caicos, right? Like that to me is like that's winning. And
Yeah.
so I see burnout and I work a lot with clients who come to me because they're like, I just don't know what I want, but I know this isn't it. That's what they say all the time. And so when I work with them, we get to a point where we say, yeah, of course, this is a part of burnout, right? There's your component and then there's these systems that you're operating in. And now what do you want to do? Right.
Mhm.
And now what feels like the best fit. So burnout's a big piece of that, I think. And COVID just exacerbated so many of the issues that many of us have known were brewing, for a long, long time in healthcare in terms of the inefficiencies and the operational dysfunction. So burnout's kind of a symptom of a bigger problem. And I think that entrepreneurship really gives an opportunity to say, if I was going to do it differently, how do I want to? Not, and I would just mention this last piece because I'm sure there are people who are listening because this is what I thought about entrepreneurship. Bobby, I don't know if this is what you thought, but when I was like, oh, it's all like, wine and roses, like it's going to be so fun. I can make the rules, right? But what happens is that if you don't become that person who manages her mind, you will be subject to burnout wherever you go. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like you just hop from one frying pan to another. And so I think that's one of the things that I tend to see if we don't do that piece of emotional intelligence and really developing self-awareness, again, we just see the same patterns, over and over again.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that you bring up entrepreneurship as an option for people because that's kind of what I've been preaching is that, like you just, and especially with the pandemic, I think a lot of people realized, oh, wow, I was laid off for 6 weeks or something or however long. And so many of us are living paycheck to paycheck. And we can't go without that paycheck, even though we may make a very good living. That lifestyle creep's a real thing. So having some different options, and that's really what I try to preach. Having something that's outside of your traditional career path, because you never know. I mean, you just never know what could happen. In your personal life or in your professional life, whatever. That you need to have something else to possibly lean on, and entrepreneurship is a big scary word for a lot of people. Oh my God, I don't want to be a business owner. I don't want to
Yeah.
do my own thing here, but so many people just feel trapped where they are. And so getting them to kind of look outside of, their regular career setting, I think is an important aspect of all this.
I agree, and it's one reason I actually started side hustles for on Facebook for APNs because when March 2020 I think was a wake up call for a lot of people when people got termed, furloughed, or you had just no work, and I mean we lost something like 40,000 jobs, healthcare jobs, in March. It was crazy how many people were all of a sudden had no income coming in, and so I looked at. I thought, my thought was like, I got it. This is a great time for me to build a business actually, because there are a couple skills that I have that I could help people with. And side hustles was like one of them because I thought you could turn a buck. Like, hey, we got a lot of skills that we know how to do a lot of things. And if you're willing to repackage and repurpose it, look at it a little differently, there's a lot of opportunity. And so that was one of the main reasons that I started side hustles. And I'm still floored to this day by how many people we get coming in. But I agree with you. I think there's this appreciation, much more so right now, for diversification of income streams and really just being mindful of not putting all your eggs in one basket for fear that one of them is if it's gone, you're kind of up a creek.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that though, because you started this Facebook group, and obviously it's grown to over 7,000 members, and obviously there's a need and a want for this type of networking. But what have you seen is the importance of networking in healthcare and business?
Well, I think it's that I think that the group in general, it's a little bit of networking and it's a little bit of that community building and being around people who are doing something that maybe you want to be doing or who have a certain skill set that you're interested in. So there's that value. There's a value of, we when people come in, we ask them to identify kind of what state they're in, and we see a lot of connections that happen between people who are, in the same geographic region, which is great. I think the other piece though about side hustles is that we get a lot of people who come in and they are, they have this kind of thought of, like you said, business isn't for me. And so, and some of them have come in with experience in MLMs and, which I don't recommend. I don't think, it's hard to make money in an MLM. Well, that's a thought. My clients would be like, and that is totally a thought. And is a thought. But we also know, what's objective data about it is that the Federal Trade Commission says MLMs, about only 1% of people actually make money on them, which is why the FTC doesn't recommend it, which means I don't recommend them. But we get a lot of people coming in with MLM experience. They've gone, they understand kind of some of the basics around digital marketing. They understand basics of taking a product or a service and selling it, maybe not in the from the vantage of being an entrepreneur, but they get some of that, exchanging value for dollars. And so side hustles is just a great way for people to just get, take that next step. And we talk about I don't generally discriminate in side hustles as long as they are money making endeavors, right? And like we have people in there who have Etsy stores who are, creating some type of swag. We have people in there who sell digital products. We have people, advanced practice nurses who are selling online courses. We have advanced practice nurses who are in private practice. We have those with mobile concierge practices for injectables and neuromodulators. I mean, we've got the gamut, functional medicine, consulting businesses. There's no shortage of opportunity. Again, if you're willing to kind of look at the skills that you have and go out there and consider is anybody interested in this and could it be useful to somebody and make an offer to them? But it's a really good group, I think, for when you're dipping a toe in maybe the W-2 one position at 110 grand isn't all there is, and it's not, so.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that I love that you bring up the skill component, because we develop certain skills during the course of our career, and we don't always utilize some of those, to the best of their ability. So, I mean, that's what you're all about. Is you've started this business coaching practice, this mastermind that's helping people get the most out of their skill set. So, how did you discover that that's really the route that you wanted to take, and how did you get moving in that direction?
I think making money is so fun. I think it's so fun. I think it's fun to make money. I think that, it's less than 5% of women actually cross the 6-figure mark. And so for me, it feels like I fight the patriarchy every day when I commit to making more money, when I get into the upper, echelon of income earners. And so I feel like that's a direct, that's so much fun, number one. And number two, is very powerful, right? Like we have a society that's built on cash and capital. And I think that having more money in your back pocket is never a bad thing. So especially when you start to talk about COVID and you start to think about, burnout and just having the luxury of being able to live in the way that you desire to live, or sending your children to the schools that you desire to send them, or having, the availability to be a resource when it comes to taking care of elderly parents, whatever it is. I just think money is a great vehicle to support, creating that version of the good life. It's not everything, but it is something. And so, and for women in particular, I get really kind of excited to think we could really change the trajectory of families and communities if we have more women who are making money at the 6-figure mark. Like that feels like amazing to me. So I really like business coaching. I love life coaching. We do a lot of life coaching. I was just talking yesterday with one of my clients about, her, she has a 3-year-old who's potty training, and she's like, I'm just in the, like I'm in the dumpster on some of these thoughts. And we coach on that. So it's always a mix of both, because I
Hmm.
think for many of us who are, either we're working, and so we've got our, a few different hats that we wear, or if we're parents, there's always kind of that life element that comes up. But the business end of it, I think, is just, it's amazing. And I think for me too, I never thought that I was built for business. Like I didn't think that was something I could do. It just never even crossed my mind. I was like, oh, I'm going into midwifery. I'm going into nursing. And I
Hmm.
just didn't. And in my family, what I saw was that there was two types of people. There was business and there was nursing. Those are the
Hmm.
two types. And so I was like, well,
Yeah.
I'm nursing, because all the other women are pretty much, they're nurses.
Hmm.
And so, it's been really fun to just say, but like, what if not? What if
Hmm.
you could, create a six-figure business? What if you could build, generate 300 grand in revenue from a business that what you just decided to do because you thought it was super fun, and you're good at it. Like
Hmm.
that's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Because when I was growing up, I was in a military household. Both my parents worked for the government, and I was raised that, hey, you go and you get the stable job, and you put away into your retirement accounts, and hopefully you're going to get a good pension and all this kind of stuff, all this security. And of course it was true for my parents, but that's not necessarily true for us now. Um, and I didn't realize how much I really didn't want to just do something for 30 years, like
Yeah.
that. I have so many other interests, and um part of the reason I've got this podcast is because I've got shiny object syndrome. So, like I want to go in all these different directions. And
Yeah.
so I was like, well, heck, if I'm going to do, it kind of allows me to scratch that itch, if you will,
Yep.
cause I can do all the research that I would do normally for something. And now I just share that with other people, and it works out. But, well, I appreciate you getting into the coaching bit, because I think about these high performance athletes and high performance, businessmen and women, and they all have coaches. They all get coaching. And so if we're just getting started in, our own business career, like we need help, we need coaching. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
the
I
service
mean,
you're providing is great.
yeah, thank you. No, it's funny. Even I was just chuckling this morning because I was doing, I got up, and I've got two kids, they're 10 and 13. And it's just like one of those mornings where I felt like I got up kind of on the wrong side of the bed. And I was just it was just like in a mood. And I knew it was interesting because I went about my morning. I get up at 5:30. I go walk with my dog. It was raining, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to walk outside. I'll go do some yoga downstairs in the basement. So I did my yoga practice. I started to feel a little bit better. And then I was sitting there and I was like, and part of the coaching that I do is really getting to understand what's going on in your brain, and just being objective, being able to observe the activity, what's on the, like the ticker feed, right, of coming
Mm-hmm.
across your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, why am I so annoyed? Why am I so like, ugh, right? And I worked in my business. We're creating a couple different programs for our goal is to have $100,000 month in revenue, by the end of the year. So we have a handful of things that we're doing and testing and all that. But I'm scared. Like I'm in a very interesting place of discomfort because it's pushing me to do things that I've not done before, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very uncomfortable. And it was funny because I was sitting there and I was like, man, to be able to see my brain and to know, from having coaching tools in my back pocket and having my own coach, but being able to see how my brain works, and then to just show it some grace and compassion and be like, of course you're totally like pooping your pants because you've not done this, and it's okay. And we just invite fear along for the ride. We allow it a seat at the table. We don't let it drive the bus, but we give it like, tea and a crumpet, and just have, tell it to
Mm-hmm.
have a seat. And after that, all of a sudden I was like, that's why I feel like I do. Like, because this morning, if you would ask me, like, do you love your business? I would be like, nope, I want to burn the whole thing down. Like, I'm over it. Like, that was I was just
Oh.
like, and so to the process of being able to take a step back and to look at it and say, what is going on in your head? And then to be able to just have some grace for it, give it some
Mm-hmm.
space, and then, allow those feelings to be there and then move on is like, that's one of the best skills that I can teach people, right? Because
Mhm.
like if you can do that, if you can see your own brain, how it works, if you can break it down, if you can think about things a little bit differently, if you're willing to name those emotions, allow them to be
Mhm.
there, you're unstoppable. Like there's
Mhm.
nothing you can't do if you're willing to feel the discomfort of thinking like it's scary to think about making 100 grand in a month and how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Right. And so I love that I have that. And I just love that I get to share that with people because it's so powerful. And if that's the key to going out and building, creating more revenue and then thus creating more advanced practice nurses who are living the good life, like sign me up. Like I'm all in. That's all.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Because I felt that way too about my business. There are times where I mean, and particularly last fall, because I felt like, man, I've been plateauing for a while now. So am I getting out of it what I'm putting into it?
Yep.
It's starting to get harder to book guests, because I'm reaching the end of my network, and and it's harder to get people's attention than it ever has been, easier and harder at the same time,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, and so I had to make the decision, okay, well, am I going to continue on the same route? Am I going to let this go? Or am I going to bust my hump and try to ramp this thing up to where it needs to be? And
Yeah.
so, and everybody reaches that point, I think, in their business. What do you want your business to look like? And what are the steps you got to take to get there?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you believe it's possible? It's so funny.
Yeah.
We talk, right? Like because I'll tell you, there have been moments where I'm like, it's never going to be, there's no way in hell that I will ever create 100 grand in a month. I mean, my brain offers me that. And
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
now I've got a good skill of being like, of course your brain is totally scared. And of course it's going to offer you every reason why this is a
Mm-hmm.
terrible idea. And that's
Yeah.
okay. That's all right. Let's work with it
Mm-hmm.
because this is a normal part of how the brain works. Let's work with it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't want to believe that, what else could you be willing to believe about 100 grand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, one of those pieces I keep coming back to, like, well, I got to work on some of my belief there. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, I know that you get on Facebook Live quite a bit, and you give advice to people who are trying to start their own side hustle.
mhm.
So what's one piece of advice that you regularly share for nurses who are trying to start their own business?
I think it's just, there's three steps that I use that I think are really powerful. Number one, how much money do you want to make? Right? Like, and if it's 10 grand, great. If it's 50 grand, great. If it's 500 grand, great. But get it out and identify a number. Number two, what skills do you have that you could repackage and repurpose and create, value, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then number three, who benefits from it? Like, is there anybody who would benefit from that? Right? Like that's how most businesses I feel like are built, at least on like what skills do I have that I
Mm-hmm.
could, create some sort of an offer, who would be interested in that, and then
Mm-hmm.
how much money do I want to make with that endeavor. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a great three-step process to start to think about, all right, if I wanted to get started, and I really loved making, little tumblers with like little logo on them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how could I do that? Well, if I wanted to make, I don't know, 10 grand by the end of the year, then, and people love tumblers and I love swag, and maybe I could make it with some like cheeky nurse thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
and would the nurses love it? Yeah, they do, because they all carry their water bottles to work. So this would be of value to them. And
Yeah.
then I say, well, if I want to make 10 grand, how much would it cost me to go out and source all the products and
Mm-hmm.
get the labor for somebody to put the logos on and pack them up and ship them? And how do I price that in a way where I'm making money and not losing money?
Yeah.
And then how many would I need to sell in order to go, right? It's just that simple,
Step by
approach.
step,
Yep.
pre-planning and having a roadmap of where you're going.
Yeah. So that's I think a great for a lot of the people who are like, but how do I do it? And then there's a segment of people who are just like, but what if I don't want to do all that? And I'm like, great, you don't have to do all that, but just go start doing something today.
Mm-hmm.
Just go
Mm-hmm.
start. Just start. Literally start right now. You want to build an Etsy shop? Great. You want to create a digital template for making charting easier for advanced practice
Mm-hmm.
nurses? Build it in Word. Figure out a way to like go get yourself a PayPal link. Go ask somebody if they want to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Send them your PayPal link. Have them pay you, and then email it to them. Boom! You have the beginnings of a side hustle or a
Yeah. Yeah.
business. Like
Yeah.
just start. So that there's those two ways. And I think based on how your brain works, if you're more of an executor, you're going to latch on to just getting out there and doing. If you're more of a strategic thinker, you're going to latch on to kind of that formula, through like a how-to process.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one it's neither good nor bad. Just go, just start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Got to get something rolling. And once you get into it a little bit, then you're gaining knowledge along the way, and you're seeing what's working and what's not working, and you can adjust along the way. So
yeah. Exactly.
For sure. Well, before we close out today, I want to make sure that listeners can get a hold of you. So what are a few ways that they can contact you?
So you can find me in Facebook, Ann Konkoly, CNM, and you can find our website. It's www.nurseslivingthegoodlife.com. And but I'm Ann Konkoly, CNM on all social, and so feel free, reach out, send me a DM if you have questions. I'd love to chat. I'm a relationship builder and love to have conversations. And then the other place probably that's of a lot of value is the podcast, Nurses Living the Good Life. It's a podcast, and we just hit our 50th episode, which is super exciting. We regularly interview, nurse CEOs, and really just get into the brains of kind of the, how people are out there, how other advanced practice nurses are out there building businesses. So
yeah, we're doing a lot of the same things. We've had a couple of the same guests on our show, so it's great to finally get together with you today and be able to have you share your knowledge with the folks that are listening here today. So I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.